Good echo.
Working, Anna.
Ready?
Perfect. So far. We're gonna.
Honey? Oh, never mind, you're busy.
Okay, you have to be quiet now.
I'm serious.
Can you hear me, Cher?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna go shut Joan's door. She's on the phone with her cousins from Maine, and they're very laughy, and they're very laid back.
Okay. Okay, Katharine and David, I have, hi Tony, hi Ann. I have unmuted you, but you have to unmute yourselves.
Do I?
No, you're unmuted, I unmuted you. We can all hear you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. As you know, we're in challenging times. We are living in times that are unprecedented in the history of humanity, because we're going through a global pandemic and we have this ability now to communicate with one another across all of these divides. There have certainly been pandemics in the past, but there's never been this opportunity to have conversation with one another, to check in with one another, to talk about the realities that we're facing, and to look at the world that we're living in and how that world has been impacted by our presence upon the earth. And so I will be hosting one of these conversations once a week with different guests. Last week, we talked about adapting to our changing reality, just dealing with the immediacy of what we were facing. Today, we're going to look at where we are right now and how we move into the future. What is it that we want to take out of this time that we're living in and carry into the future when we all start moving again? Because this is a really incredibly powerful opportunity for us to be cultivating something collectively that can move us in a new direction when we go forward. And I think that it's really important for us to be thinking about the ways that we can really dive into this time, to think about what happens when we let go of the breath we've been holding for so long because we've been moving at such a rapid pace. We've been forced to move so quickly that many of us haven't had time to take a deep breath for a long, long time. And so right now, I feel like this is a time where we can really exhale, where we can dive down into a deeper part of ourselves, where we can start to explore the creative intelligence that's lying under the surface, where we can free up that creative intelligence as other things are falling away, and that creative intelligence can rise to the surface and can guide us and lead us in a new direction. And so we're going to dive into this conversation. I am very, very happy to be joined tonight by three amazing human beings who I am very fortunate to call my friends. Chief Ronald Tremblay, the Grand Chief of the Wolastoq First Nation, is joining us. And Ron has been on the front lines of Indigenous rights movements for a very, very long time. He has been a staunch supporter of Indigenous women. He has dedicated his life to ceremonial practice and to the protection and the advancement of his own people, including being a keeper of his language. And so, Kachiwili Wanidap, thank you, Ron, for being with us this evening. I'm also joined by David Ragland. David is another fierce activist and advocate. David has been on the front lines as well. He was on the front lines in Ferguson. He created this amazing organization called the Truth Telling Project, where he brought together collectives of people across all of these different illusory lines to have conversations about facing the truth of the social injustice that exists within this country. And he is somebody that I have become good friends with over the last several years, and he's now living in an intentional community in New York, going back to the land, reconnecting, and really bringing forward something that is so critically important in my mind, and David can speak to this for himself of how important it is for him, because of the ways that Black people were forced to work the land for others. You know, this movement of coming back to the land, reconnecting to that umbilical of Mother Earth is so powerfully healing, I think, as it is for all of us who have been through the ravages of colonization. And so I just really admire the courage that David has illustrated in his life, and also the guidance that he continues to offer to people through the example of his own way of being in the world. And then finally, I am thrilled to be joined by my friend Katharine Wilkinson. Katharine Wilkinson is an all-around badass. She is one of the most brilliant people that I know. There was an incredible book that came out called Drawdown, 100 Best Solutions to Climate Change, and it had Paul Hawken's name on it. Not to disparage Paul Hawken, however, this woman was really the one who put the book together. She is on the front lines of climate change solutions. She works with people all over the world. She's an incredible thinker who really can look at something critically and find a creative solution within the matrix of all of these different converging points of interest. And I've often just been so inspired by conversations with Katharine because of the way that she sees the world and the way that she's able to think on a global scale, but also to see things microscopically, so that she can really look at what is the thing here that needs to be addressed and how can we address it using the collective resources that we have. And so you can read bios on all of these people online, but I want to use our time today in conversation. So thank you, all three of you, for being here for this conversation tonight. And I think that what we're going to do is I would like to start off by asking each of you a question about the topic that we're going to be discussing tonight. And so we can each take a few minutes to answer that question. And I'll have a couple questions for each of you, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And so I would like to start with Ron. and just ask you, Ron, why is it important at this time for us to change the way that we live?
Welcome to Genzo Gizi Minawaka to the Waganan, the Holdaka Waganan, the Gazito did Natal Waganan, first and foremost, I wanted to address you in the Wolastoq way. Wagan, our language is that I wanted to give thanks to the ancestors of our people who saved our ceremonies and our language, and who created those powerful peace and friendship treaties that we're bound to today. What was the question again?
Why is it important for us to change the way that we live right now?
Why is it important? Well, the evidence is right here, is that we're all sitting in our homes. We can't meet face to face. Is that I recall back in 1993, I was attending the University of New Brunswick here in Fredericton. And this man came to speak to us, and his name was William Commanda. And he's from the Maniwaki community of Quebec. And he brought this prophecy. And he spoke the whole night talking about prophecy. And he brought this prophecy about with him. It was quite a very lengthy and wide prophecy belt he brought. And it was approximately 25 feet long by a foot wide. And he spoke about the creation of our peoples. And he went and he spoke on each section of the development of the earth, the creation of the earth and humans and the animals. And then he finally got to this place in the belt, which was close to the finish of the belt, the end of the belt, and there was a cross, like a crossroad, and it wasn't a Christian cross, but it was a very distinct cross, and he said that humanity is going to eventually come to this time and place that they have to choose which road they're going to take. And he said, there's the road that's green and a beautiful path of the connection and balance through all creation, all life forms, or there's that road of devastation. He says, humanity will have to choose. And he said, young man, which I was like 33 at the time, he said, you will see this during your time. And he said, I will be gone though. So here we are, having to choose. And I truly believe that this is those crossroads that humanity really has to sit down. And this is a huge global wake-up call right now, is that, and it will not be the leaders who choose this, it's going to be the people. Because the people are going to move this whole shift. I call the shift of life, and I've read a lot of documents and reports recently that the Earth is breathing again. Life is starting to form, and pollution is started to lift because of our stillness. So the reason why we have to do it is because look what we're seeing right now. So that's the evidence.
Thank you, Ron. Katharine, would you like to answer that same question? Why is it that you feel it's important for us to change the way that we're living right now?
So I am just emerging from a writing and editing cave, putting the finishing touches on an anthology that Sherri contributed to, writings by women climate leaders from across the country. And it has not been announced yet, but the book will be out in September. It's called All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And we have a closing poem. There are 16 poems throughout the collection, but the closing poem is by Alice Walker. And I think it's so perfect for this topic, Sherri. So I'll read it and then share a few words. It's called Calling All Grandmothers. We have to live differently, or we will die in the same old ways. Therefore, I call on all grandmothers everywhere on the planet to rise and take your place in the leadership of the world. Come out of the kitchen, out of the fields, out of the beauty parlors, out of the television. Step forward and assume the role for which you were created, to lead humanity to health, happiness, and sanity. I call on all the grandmothers of Earth and every person who possesses the grandmother spirit of respect for life and protection of the young to rise and lead. The life of our species depends on it. And I call on all men of Earth to gracefully and gratefully stand aside and let us do so. And I think, I spend most of my days, as Sherri said, thinking about the climate crisis and the solutions at hand. And I think it is so important to understand the climate crisis as a leadership crisis. And it is that very same leadership crisis that is on display today. And I think part of why it's so important to change the way that we are living is because the only solution to the leadership crisis that is literally crippling the planet and crippling humanity is for us to have a leaderful response to that. So I think this is a moment that really highlights so much. It highlights the cruelties of this system that we're living in. It highlights the absolute necessity of justice anytime we're talking about shifts in the economy and society. But it really, really shines a light on the crisis of leadership and vision. And I think this feels to me like an opening for stepping in to more of that, not just in the context of a pandemic, but in the context of the climate crisis and this sort of massive transformation that is at hand.
Thank you, Katharine. David, same question. Why is it important for us to change the way that we're living right now? You're on mute.
Perfect.
There you
All
go.
right. Thank you for having me, Sherri, and such a pleasure to be here with brilliant and important thinkers. And I am calling in from Stony Point, New York, and the land I'm on right now is traditionally Wabanaki. I'm sorry, I'm used to saying that, but traditionally Ramapo land. And I was thinking about this question and thinking about just where I am now, thinking about the way that we live, the way that we're living and why it's so important to change. And I was talking to a mentor friend of mine, Ed Whitfield, and he said to me, things will never be the same. And I agree with him. I wish that we would have had a way to being able to transition in a different way, but this is where we are. And I think that it's really important to change how we live, because I think the way we live now is in part in complicity with injustice and evil birthed by genocides, colonizations, and slavery. If you think about how injustice is networked, most likely, I know that I realized that I owned mutual funds that were invested in prisons. I owned some stock in my retirement account that was connected to weapons manufacturers and people who are polluting our planet, or products that I have purchased. For instance, if you buy Brownie paper towels, you are supporting the deprivation of water to communities in Michigan because Brownie is owned by the Koch brothers. And some of those ways we can't help because they're hidden. There's a group called the Anti-War Tax Resistance Group, and they found out that if you have a landline, you were likely paying a tax called the universal tax that Nixon put in place so that it wouldn't seem like he was taking such a big chunk of people's money for war, and that money went to the Pentagon. And so in so many ways, whether you agree with it or not, you're made complicit. We're made complicit in violence against people and our planet, and against vulnerable communities. And so that is urgently important to change. And also is not sustainable. Extraction of people and their families, their labor, the land is not sustainable. And we're able to do this, and we have to change this because we're so disconnected from our ancestors and the planet. And I mean, the plant, I had a friend who is very spiritual. I try to be very spiritual as well and connected, and connecting so much deeper with this. But let me first say that Ta-Nehisi Coates described and suggested that white folks need to reconnect with their ancestors as an urgent matter. Not that, that amorphous whiteness, but where am I from? Who am I really? And also the planet. This colleague of mine was saying how she had a dream, and in the dream, usually her ancestors come to her in dreams and speak with her. And she said this time there were birds and a big cat in a tree. We don't have another home to go to. This planet is our mother. We have to change the way that we behave so that we can live. The planet will continue to live. We may not be able to. So it is urgent that we unravel ourselves from the complicity that builds, that requires us to unknowingly spend money on oppression of the planet, oppression of other people. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Katharine and I had a conversation earlier in the week, and she's talking about leaderful, and now David's talking about birds. So I'm going to take that as a sign to share an experience that I had that was incredibly powerful for me and for two of my friends who happened to be present when this happened. Throughout this process, I've been thinking about this story that from our mythology about where the first illness came from. And for those of you who tuned in last week, I had asked Dr. Jess Cree to talk a little bit about that story as she talked about the medicines that we can be using at this time. And the story tells us that human beings, the children of the earth, because we're the youngest species on the planet, had begun to fall out of line with the rest of the natural world. And, mind you, these stories are hundreds of years old. And it just absolutely blows my mind that I'm telling you this story in the moment of this reality. And so human beings had begun to fall out of line with the rest of creation, and they were starting to cause destruction and harm that was impacting the rest of life. And so the animals went into council with one another. And what they decided was they were going to give human beings illness to let them know that there were consequences for their behavior. And so the animals decided to give the human beings illness. And human beings began to get very, very sick, and many of them were dying. And the plant nations decided that after watching the humans suffering so greatly, that if the humans came to them, relearned the language of the plants, and asked them for help, that the plants would help them to heal. And that in the process of them having to come back to the plants and to learn the language of the plants, it would bring them back towards alignment with the rest of creation. And so here we are living at a time where we have been given illness by the animals, and where allopathic medicine has been failing to provide solutions. And it is plant-based, earth-based medicine that is offering the best solutions for people right now. So we are living this story again. Our mythology tells us that we have been here 4 times. This is the 4th time that we've been here. And that every time we've come to the same crossroads and we've failed to make the right decision and to take the necessary action to move us beyond this place of illusory separation, not only from one another, but from the rest of the natural world. And that, we have this collective opportunity again that is presenting itself to us to change the way that we're living, to go back and to once again learn the language of the earth. And when we talk about, the earth being our mother, and that is our umbilical connection to Mother Earth that sustains our life. When we're born, we come from the other side into our first ecosystem, which is our mother's womb. And there our mother sustains us and nurtures our life until we're born into this earth, and that's our second ecosystem. And when that happens is a transference of that umbilical connection from our birth mother to the earth mother. And then the earth mother sustains us for the remainder of our lives. And so, what's happened is that there are many people who have lost their connection, that umbilical connection to Mother Earth. And as a result, the sustenance of their humanity has been sapped away. They've lost the sweetness, the generosity, the kindness, the mother love that flows up through that umbilical cord into human beings. And as a result have been behaving in ways that are counter to the proliferation of life. And so now we are here at this time, we have these stories to guide us. And, the challenge for us right now is for us to relearn the language of the earth, because that is beyond all separations, divisions, and labels that we give ourselves. That is our mother tongue. Our true mother tongue is being able to understand that language of the earth. And so when we're thinking about changing the way that we live, part of that process, the most fundamental part of that process, is bringing ourselves back into alignment with life. And so the second question that I have for you all is, what are some things that people can be doing right now to begin the process of changing the way that we are living in relation to the rest of creation? And I think this time I'm going to start with Katharine. You're muted.
Okay, Am I unmuted now? That was like a layered unmuting. I have a dog at my feet, and this is, you know, an hour of like neighbors moving around. So you never know when you're going to get some canine commentary. Yeah. So I shared with Sherri the other night that the first part of my personal theme for this year is slow down. And Sherri was like, you might reflect on the power of that intention. But I think slow down is actually a really important part of the changes that we're talking about, that I think can be very hard to do when the rest of the world around you is still spinning at its same velocity. And so I've been really appreciative of more time to be reading and thinking deeply and writing and grounding, to meditate, to cook good local food. One of the things that I've been delighted to hear amongst so many hard and heartbreaking stories is that the local food movement, the farmers around in and around Atlanta, more people are connecting with local food in this moment than they have ever had before. So, you know, co-ops and farm shares and these things they're maxed out, which I think is a wonderful piece. That slow down often also means sort of a relocalization, and starting in this sort of smallest sphere that we are a part of. Parker Palmer's work has been very influential for me over the years, and again, sort of speaking from the perspective of the climate movement, you know, this is such a, pardon the pun, this is a super hot time for the movement. So people are very externally focused, thinking about mobilizations and strikes and the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and I think the moment we're in sort of allows the gaze to return inward a bit, to do some of that inner work that keeps us in the work and keeps that outer collective work being more about care and repair and the community building that has to happen in advance of manifesting change. But I think sometimes it can feel in the midst of the urgency, like, you know, how selfish are we to take the time to do that inner work? But actually, and this is something I really have taken so much from Sherri's work, that they are one and the same.
Thank you, Katharine. Ron?
I want to show you this is a belt, wampum belt. It's the Wabanaki Confederacy belt. It consists of five crosses that represents the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoq, the Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and the Abenaki. And the square at the end is the longhouse, and there's a pipe here that joins the five nations. And the pipe represents that balance of feminine and masculine. When you join the two, it creates life, and it gives us and teaches us that responsibility, how we're supposed to live within our families, within our communities, and with the earth. So we all have these very forward and direct responsibilities, as well as the two-spirited people, the people that carry these wonderful gifts of those two spirits. The reason why I wanted to show you the belt is because we've been, our nation has been focusing on getting some land back here in the middle of the city of Fredericton. There's a big piece of green land that we're putting a proposal in to build a permanent longhouse, to have an organic garden, and to have a indigenous Wabanaki college, and plus an immersion school for the starting with the pre-K and up to grade 6 for the beginning stages, and then eventually up to grade 12. So I think the goal for our nation is to focus on food sovereignty and building our own gardens. And we're a neighbor to 3 Wolastoq communities here within the radius of like 20 miles. So we will nurse and feed those 3 communities, hopefully in the near future, once we get this project going, and to reclaim and re-establish our longhouse, which is our traditional democracy here, and where it's led and fed by the grandmothers and clanmothers. So it's all based around the language, food sovereignty, self-governance, and to reclaim our nationhood. That's our goal, and so we're working with the other Wabanaki nations to follow suit.
Thank you, Ron. David.
Thank you. I appreciate what you both said, Ron and Katharine, and I just want to kind of reiterate some things that were said. Slow down is really important, and I think even though I saw some comments that said that seems counterintuitive, and what this system does is it forces us all to engage it in a certain way, to work in a certain way, to expend our energy in ways we're just on a this reel where we're going over and over. And I don't know how many people, if anyone has saw the video, hi,
Sakara.
the images where you can see China, how China? Yes, China. How China, after they stopped, pretty much shut down factories because of the COVID-19 outbreak, you saw, you could see how they changed. All right, I love you. Okay. All right. All right, you can see, and I don't know if I could share my screen to show you all this, but I would like to. All right. Okay. All right. Someone else is sharing the screen, but you essentially saw so much, like you saw a break with pollution, like you saw like less pollution. They had these maps, and so for me, like I thought that was really important. That imagine like this particular moment, I think it was said earlier, could in part be a chance for us to take a break, to reassess, but not just that, to give our planet and like its ability to recover in certain ways a chance. I mean, we saw in Los Angeles that they're reporting to have a less smog and CO2 emissions. the other piece is act locally. And I know that that was said earlier, but I think that's connected to like growing your own food or beginning to grow your own food and reconnect with the planet. And I think spirituality, or most spiritualities, have like all emerged from specific cultural context. And I think it is so important to re-engage in spirituality and in culture. And I'm not saying like it's time to go back in the cave and be factioned off, but like it is time, I think, to re-engage in spiritualities that connect deeply with who we all are as persons and ethnicities. And that's why I think it's so important what, Ron, what you all are doing. And I'm hearing about a number of people doing this. I would also say support art. And lastly, I would say connect with women's ways of knowing, as was mentioned by Katharine earlier. And I think like often women have been the ones to keep communities together. And one of my favorite poems by Alice Walker is Democratic Womanism. And in it, she says, who would grandmothers and aunties and sisters poison the planet? You know, who you know, like, and so I think like it is really important, I think, to be connected and connect with children and connect with child rearing as an important part of what we do, even though like we're at home and we can't have childcare right now. I'm finding this a really important part in teaching our kids and our grandkids to connect with the planet. And I actually live on a farm right now in my intentional community. And I actually think I would encourage people to organize and see how they can grow food together and share. So okay. I think I kind of rambled, but.
It was a really good ramble. Yeah, thank you. And there are just a few things I want to touch on. And the first is this concept of slowing down. So for those of you who have read my book, or maybe even heard me speak at different times, I've talked about Giwalk, the cannibal giant. And so the cannibal giant, just the very shortened version of the story, the cannibal giant is a protective being who is one of Mother Earth's protectors. And he remains asleep deep in the forest until he hears a very specific call of the Earth Mother. And this is a call of distress when the Earth Mother is being harmed faster than she can heal, and when people are consuming faster than she can create. And so the cannibal giant awakens to that cry of the Earth Mother and comes out and begins to play the flute and to lull people into this false sense of security and to move them in this dance that moves ever and ever and ever faster, so that they eventually will, continue to consume to the point where they consume themselves right off the planet, and then Mother Earth has the opportunity to heal. And so it may seem counterproductive to be dancing people into this hypnotic dance of consumption, mindless consumption, in order to heal Mother Earth. But what that does is it quickens the lifespan of humanity on the planet, so that the Earth Mother has a faster opportunity to get to the point of healing. And so the whole purpose of Giwalk's dance is to move us faster and faster and faster, because we have become a danger to the Earth Mother. We also are seeing the quickened pace of society in regard to governmental decisions, in regard to legislation that's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages long, that is being decided on in a very short period of time. where people don't have the opportunity to actually read what's in it. That's how we get some of these crazy things being stuffed into the back of bills that have no business being there. This kind of trickery that is causing devastation. Why is it that environmental laws were relaxed during this time of Earth crisis, right? And so this slowing down process is essential because the only way for us to extricate ourselves from Giwalk's dance is for us to wake up. That's the only way that Giwalk goes back to sleep, is when we wake up. And so the process of us waking up is this slowing down process, exiting from the fast-paced dance that doesn't allow us to have the time to make thoughtful decisions, that doesn't allow us to think about or to listen for the voices of our future generations crying to us and asking us to be born, and begging us to provide them with the opportunity to live that we've been gifted. And so one of my favorite poems, Holographic Universe poem by Drew Dellinger, says that I'm awake at 3 a.m. because my great-great-great-grandchildren will not allow me to sleep. And he says in the poem that they won't allow him to sleep because they want to know, what did he do once he knew? What did he do once he knew that the earth was falling apart, that the natural world was being devastated, that species were going extinct? What did you do once you knew? We are at this point of knowing right now, knowing that we are in the midst of the cannibal giants dance. What we're seeing right now across the board with some of the things that are being done, especially in the United States, is a form of cannibal capitalism, where people are being viewed as collateral damage to an economy that doesn't sustain life. And so, capitalism is cannibalizing its consumers. And so we're living in that time. And so I think it's really important for us to take this opportunity to slow down and to think about the pace with which we want to re-enter the world. We have an incredible opportunity to thoughtfully re-enter the world at a different pace and from a different place of connectivity. And so the story that I wanted to tell you earlier, and I just got excited about the next question, and it seemed like a natural transition, so I let it go, was about this experience that I had last Thursday. So I was, as many of my friends and relatives have been doing, like Ron, and some of the other clan mothers and ceremony keepers from Chquabinakiek, we've been praying every morning and every evening. We've been asking for guidance on what's going on right now. And so I have been praying to the bird nations, asking them for guidance. And I had, my daughter is living with me right now, my daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter, while they're finishing building their new house. And so I was there on Thursday helping to put in floors. And it was just me and two friends who volunteered to come and help me, Steve and Mark, and we were working on the house, and we had stopped to have lunch. And we were sitting there, and I was telling Ron about this experience, and that Medeolan way of being is about this point of knowing that comes from that connection to spirit. So we talk about that word Medeolan, that space between the wood and the skin on the drum is the place where the sound is created. If we think about the hollow reed, we think about becoming an empty vessel, all of that stuff is really connected to where we obtain information from our collective consciousness, where we are getting guidance from those who have lived before us. That's where ancestral knowledge is kept. And so in that Medeolan way of being, there's a sense of knowing before it's known. There's a sense of hearing before it's audibly heard. a sense of seeing before something appears before your eyes. And in this experience, I could hear what was coming before I audibly heard it. And then all of a sudden, and I'm going to make funny gestures on the screen because this is really what it was like. We were sitting there and all of a sudden it was like this. And it was bird shadows crossing the windows. And I was up out of my chair.
Hi.
And one of the guys asked, what was that? And I said, it's birds. And I was out the door. Somebody is.
Oh, good job.
Somebody
That's
is
beautiful. Mwah. Good job. What?
Okay, somebody is unmuted and is talking to somebody about a good job. Can you please mute your line? Let me see. I have to manage
I
my.
love it. You like it?
Okay, so I was out the door, and there were thousands, not hundreds, thousands of starlings that were coming onto the property. And, you know, you see starlings moving in murmuration. My friend Rivera Sun talks about starlings as being representative of a leaderful movement. And they circled around the property and they landed in the trees in like a 200-foot perimeter all around the property. They're in a complete circle from the lowest branch to the highest branch. All of the trees were starlings. I mean, there were literally thousands of them. And they were being so loud, making such a loud cry that it was just like shaking everything. So I went back inside and I got some tobacco to go out and to pray. You know, because when you ask for something, it comes, right? When you pray to the bird nations and ask for guidance, they'll give you the guidance if you're open to receiving them. And so I went back inside and I got some tobacco and I put the tobacco down and I just sat there and I concentrated on getting out of my own human way so that I could connect with and I could hear what it was that the starlings were trying to communicate. And then there was this hum underneath the bird song that just rose up and almost drowned out the bird song. It was like being in the center of a tornado. It sounded like a freight train. And it shook through all of us. I mean, it was like rattling my bones. It was so powerful. And I just kept praying and kept praying. And the guys must have been praying as well, because it was just an overwhelming experience for all of us. And I put the tobacco down. And when I finished my prayer and I put my hand up and I said to them, you know, Kachiwaliwan, and Dilnabama Kachiwaliwan, thank you for coming and for helping us and for guiding us and for giving me that message. And I ask you to continue to guide me as we move through this process so that I can understand fully what it was that you were trying to share, because there was such an urgency to their message. I mean, they were just powerfully trying to communicate. And then all of a sudden the sound completely stopped. All the bird song stopped, the hum stopped, everything stopped, and the birds as one lifted up and just flew off. And we couldn't even speak to one another for quite a while. And we were all, you know, just wanted to sob. It was so powerful. And, you know, we just felt like we were in this alternate dimension for the whole rest of the day. And so I've been really thinking about that and praying about that. And we've been talking a little bit about it amongst the three of us. And one of the things that happened is that this realization about the opportunity for collective action, this awareness of us being part of one living system. We are one living being having these individualized experiences of ourselves, right? simultaneously. And so in this individualized process of us experiencing ourselves simultaneously as one living being is the whole reality of the starling's way of being, that they collectively come together as one biological entity. And what they do is they non-violently address a perceived threat. They surround that threat, and then collectively they move it out of the way. There's so many of them that they could very easily attack the other bird that is being perceived as a threat, and they could probably kill it, but they choose not to do that. Instead, they just surround it, and through this movement, they lead it out of the way. And the leaderful stuff that Katharine was talking about is the same thing that my friend Rivera's son talks about, is that in a murmuration, the starlings are moving, they go in any direction. Like instantaneously, the whole group moves. It's like, how are they communicating this? And so there's this collective consciousness at play in the process of being part of this murmuration, that there is all of this really rapid and clear, concise, targeted communication that's going on between all of the individual birds within the murmuration. And what starlings are teaching us right now is to think about, how do we create, we talk a lot about hive mind. How do we create this really expanded pause moment, this deep exhalation? How do we create unity within a collective so that we can begin moving ourselves and our communities, no matter how big or small those communities are, in a way that moves the threats to our well-being out, without being part of the destructive pattern, without becoming conquest activists ourselves, without becoming part of the destruction. How do we do that in a way that allows us to maintain the integrity of our own value system? And so that's what I'm really thinking about right now. I'm in the process of working to create my own intentional community, and am working right now on figuring out some of the details and logistical stuff about preparing the land for that. And I'm thinking about that, in that scale, but I'm also thinking about it in regard to this hive mind scale. How can we take the microcosmic experience that we're having as communities and collectives and help to expand that, not in a globalization sort of way, but in a way of really being able to share what we're learning, being able to build healthy relationships. How do we, across our communities and within our bioregions, build collectives of sharing, these collectives of a mothering type economy that's based on the love that a mother has for her children? How do we become food sovereign, energy sovereign? How do we become educationally sovereign, right? How do we achieve water sovereignty so that we're not only having all of the things that we need collectively to live, but we also are taking away the power that others are exerting over us because of our dependency on systems that are not designed to support and sustain life. And so there's always going to be sacrifice zones. But when we start taking responsibility for building the collectives that we want to inhabit, how do we step into the world that we want to inhabit if we don't do the work of building the world that we want to step into? So that's what I'm thinking about right now. And that's what is really getting me jazzed up about this time, is that we have this incredible opportunity. So my suggestion on what people can be doing right now is, how do we reach out to those in our circles, those closest to us, and how do we begin to plan ways for us to become food sovereign, water sovereign, energy sovereign, and educationally sovereign? How do we begin this process of determining for ourselves what values and priorities are going to determine the network of our lives. And so David talked about culture. And I think the importance of that is that, you know, many people have stripped away their culture to become part of this melting pot. And the soup was never meant to be mush. It was meant to be stew, right? With all of these individual parts working collectively together, because all of our biosystems have incredible biological diversity, and that's what makes them healthy and strong. That's what we need. We need biological diversity. We need human diversity. We need diversity of ideas in order to be able to unleash the creative intelligence that is available to us and lying under the surface. And so when we reconnect to our cultural ways of being and our cultural ways of knowing, what we find within that is our core cultural values. And so this leads me to the next question. What values and priorities based on those values? So first, what values? And then the second question, what priorities based on those values do you want to see carried out of this time and into the world, made manifest once we come out of this time? And I'm going to go to David first on this one. Oh, I got to unmute you because we had chatter in the background. There you go.
Thank you for that question, and I appreciate everything that you said. And you know, I started to think about as you were talking about the starlings. I was thinking about emergence. Particularly, I don't know if folks have read Emergent Strategies, but it is similar. And so emergence is essentially the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. So part of that is connected to staying local and how the ecological, I guess, footprint that we impact on the world is minimized if we're local, but also you're more likely to know what is being used, what ingredients are being used, who's producing it, so you don't have surprises about what kind of person and what kind of things are being used to produce. But then also that emergence is, I think, connected to what Sherri was describing in the starlings. And there's a piece right here, and it says, this is from Emergent Strategies, and it says, there is an art to flocking, staying separate enough to not crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain the shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move toward each other. So in part, that's also emergence. Mm-hmm. And I also think some of the other values that are really important is adaptability. Mm-hmm. We are living in a moment where we must adapt. And right, this is, and Mandy put Emergent Strategies by Adrienne Marie Brown. That's correct. So being able to adapt. And also the notion of that change is constant, that's the only thing that we're going to be able to do. If we're not able to adapt to change, then we're in big trouble. And I think that some of the other values are interconnectedness, being connected, but also interdependence, where there's some connection with each other and some support for each other. I think people are using terms like mutual aid now, and that's extremely important. I would also talk about intersectionality, like viewing in this particular moment the ways people's identity are not what you think they are and not how they look, but often people are experiencing various forms of oppression, and to be able to support and respond to people in those ways. And I would also say indigeneity. We are all from somewhere. Our peoples are from somewhere. And you know, in my community, we only move or we do things in a large part in agreement with the original inhabitants of this community, the Ramapo. And so for folks who are thinking about intentional communities, consider things like indigenous easement on your land that says that the group that was there before you, their descendants should have access to it, but also looking, when I talk about being local, to what types of things traditionally grew there. And there's a reason why people grew the things that they grew on that land, and there was so that it was spiritually connected. And this isn't a value, but I want to talk about that interconnection again, and talk about the notion of mycelium, which is the fungus that grows beneath the ground. And how do we connect with each other? How are we interdependent? How are we interconnected? And that is, so let me give you an example just really quickly. So depending on how, if you're a farmer, depending on how you farm, often people who cultivate the land without having cover crops, or having land uncovered, allows for carbon to escape. And what people are coming to understand is that this kind of Western farm or land cultivation is in part responsible for the levels of carbon in the atmosphere. And covering the land is really important, but there's a thing called sugar trail. And often plants would let sugar go and get what it needed back from other plants in the environment around it, and then be networked, all right, like forests networked underneath the ground. And for me, that is a value, or thinking about what does it mean to be local and to be able to share and have natural ways of connecting with the people in your community. And so yeah, I would say that's what I'm thinking about in this moment.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Okay. Katharine. Values and priorities that we should bring out.
Yeah.
That we should bring up and then bring out with us as we re-emerge, this emergence.
Yeah. So it's been a wonderful journey to co-edit with Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson this anthology. And so we've just been writing what we've been calling the forward and the onward. And the onward is a lot about the values that cut across these perspectives and stories and voices of 39 essayists and 16 poets. So I might just read a couple passages from the end of that. So where do we go from here? First, we take a breath. It's a lot. And in some ways, we humans were not designed for a crisis this massive and all-encompassing. In other ways, we were made for this moment. What we do now is dream. From a foundation of science and community, we must imagine the future we want to live in and the future we want to pass on. And every day, do something to reel the dream closer to reality. This work is hard and uncertain, yet we find our warrior spirits, charge ahead, and care for each other every step of the way. We will stumble as we chart this unmapped path. Let's forgive our fallibility, safeguard our empathy, and lead with kindness as we go. In poignant words from Adrienne Rich, there must be those among whom we can sit down and weep and still be counted as warriors. We hope this book embodies that kindred circle. If there is one theme that runs through the collection, it is ferocious love for one another, for Earth, for all beings, for justice, for a life-giving future. Let's move forward with love, not conquest, humility, not righteousness, generous curiosity, not hardened assumptions. It is a magnificent thing to be alive in a moment that matters so much. Let's proceed with broken, open hearts, seeking truth, harnessing courage, and focused on solutions. So I think that covers a lot of it.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katharine. Okay, Ron. Values and priorities. What are the values and how do we use those to determine our priorities as we emerge from this time?
Values. It kind of makes me think of one of the old recordings we have of a woman here back in the early 50s. She spoke all in our language. She said at the beginning, she said, "God you dapo agunod magan when did you lay open?" And those words, when I first heard them, I thought, oh, they were so powerful and so meaningful. Is that what she said was, this is not just a story, or these aren't just stories, these are the truth. And through our life as Wolastoq Gawiag and Wabanok Gawiag, is that we're the people of the first light. According to our creation stories, we were created first as peoples of this land. And by being created, we were given a lot of responsibilities and a lot of original teachings. And the value and those original values and the responsibilities that we were given is that our very first treaty and agreement, the covenant, was with creation. Every part of the land. We had agreed to live respectively and to honor every living thing on earth. We knew that some of the four-leggeds and some of the winged and some of the swimmers would give up their life to sustain us. And we, in return, would respect them. We wouldn't take more than what we needed. Same with the plant life and the tree life. That we agreed with them that we would only take what we need to survive. And there's a truth that was given to us back in the day, and this was a time when our people got really sick, and a lot of them, children were dying, the elders were dying, just like now. And this old man was laying inside his wigwam, and this little man came to his door, and he opened his flap of his wigwam, and he told the old man to rise and to walk with him. So they walked to this swampy spot of land, and the little old man told the old man to get on his knees to dig. So he said, I want you to dig this root. So he showed him what to do, and then once he dug the root, he said, I want you to take it back, and he told him how to prepare that root to get his people well again. And he said, this is Gilhazawasq, which is muskrat root, and this is where this root lived, near where the muskrats lived. So as the old man was still on his knees digging, he looked up to thank that little old man, and that little old man just vanished. So he went back to his wigwam, and he prepared it, and he passed out that root to all the people who were sick, and they eventually got well. And what I failed to mention is that the little old man said, to remember what the root looks like, he said, look at my body. And the little old man's body was the same shape as that root. He says, plus he said, teach your people not to be selfish again, not to take more than what they need. That's why they are sick. They are abusing the animals, they're abusing the fish, they're abusing the vegetation. So these values of living in that and bringing back those original teachings of balance and living with that respect with all the creation. We've been working with a group of Wabanaki youth in the past 3-4 years, and we've been conveying this important message of our original teachings to them, and these young people range from the age of 21 to 30, and they're all post-secondary graduates of masters or a degree of some sort, but they're still so connected to our culture. So we're utilizing their Western knowledge, and we're building them up with this Wolastoq and this Wabanaki wisdom that we want to instill so they can live that balanced life. So we've been really focusing on our young people, because that's going to be our savior. And according to, and I'll conclude with this, is that when William Commander was talking about that prophecy belt, he said before the crossroads, he said there'll be a huge awakening of rainbow warriors, he called them. He said it'll be these young people who will awaken and who will bring forth all this wisdom of knowledge of the ancestors. That's the beginning of the eighth fire. And now we have all these bright and brilliant and committed young people all across the world who are coming forth with this message, because they know they have to save the earth and the water, the air, for them and their children, and for the next 7 generations to succeed and to live a better life than what we are doing today. So that's what I want to share.
Only one. So I wanted to share a few things with you from my book, and have this light here because it's a little bit dark in this room, but looking at chapter 15 in my book, which is on core cultural values. There's a whole chapter on the type of values that I feel are really important for this time. The first one is to find ways to live communally, to stop being obsessed with this society obsession with youth and beauty, that we're so obsessed with it that we discount our elders. You know, we send our elders out to old age farms to die alone, rather than cherishing them at the end of their lives. And I think that's another really critical part, is that, you know, we need to look at the reflection that this obsession with youth has brought to society, that there is a superficiality and shallowness and a lack of maturity in the society. And that's because of our obsession with youth. You know, people spend all of this money to stay young when, you know, becoming an elder is such an incredible gift. And so, you know, look to the elders and let go of some of that obsession with youth. Also, live cooperatively rather than competitively. Have patience instead of being aggressive. Learn to listen before you speak. Seek harmony rather than conquest. Humility over arrogance. I think one of the things that our leadership is lacking these days is humility. We see all kinds of arrogance, but we really lack humility, because those who are humble are willing to continue to learn. Those who are humble realize that they don't know everything. And so they're open to new ideas. They're open to new creative solutions. And so that's really important. Sharing instead of saving, all of this hoarding that's going on right now, so that there are those who are left without. How do we create networks of sharing? How do we support one another? We have these two, the chapter following the chapter on core cultural values is on what we call Skajinawe B'Moswag, this indigenous way of being. And I talk about Alabizu and Mama Bizu from my tribe, which is about Mama Bizu is this concept of enough, that I have enough to live my life with dignity. Alabizu is about making sure that everyone has enough to be able to live their lives with dignity. And it's a recognition that it is this Alabizu, the communal sense of enough, that actually creates wealth within society. It's our ability to care for one another in meaningful ways. So sharing is important. Also, being inclusive instead of exclusive. I wrote an article called "The Danger of Inclusivity in an Exclusive Society." The society has been built on exclusivity, on caste systems, false hierarchies. So how do we begin to break those down, not by conquering and overthrowing them, but by becoming more inclusive ourselves, by making sure that everybody's needs are met, that there is justice for everyone, that there is food for everyone, that there is water for all beings within creation. You know, all of these things that are really critically important. Also, wholeness as opposed to fragmentation. We've been taught to break ourselves down into individual parts and sell different aspects of ourselves, right? I could spend a whole day talking about that one thing. But, you know, if we don't figure out the ways that we have broken ourselves apart and fragmented ourselves and commodified ourselves and made ourselves saleable, then we are never going to be able to emerge as full expressions of the wonderful and beautiful whole human beings that we are, connected spiritually, emotionally, you know, mentally and physically, and being able to offer all of what we were born into. So somebody, you know, had mentioned the young people. I think that was Ron. I just felt like a Brady Bunch moment where I looked down at the block that Ron is in and expected him to look back up at me. You know, our young people, the people being born right now, don't just seem wiser, they are wiser. And they are being born with very specific gifts that are designed to help guide us through this time. And so being able to listen to our young people, and honoring the gifts that they're carrying into the world with them is important, but also for us to find our own sense of wholeness so that we can emerge fully embodied with all of our gifts intact and then rise up and offer them to the world with a sense of completeness and a sense of knowing who we truly are and what we're truly born for. And then finally, collaboration over winning. You know, and stop trying to win and start looking at ways that we can collaborate so that everyone is doing okay. It's, you know, it's okay for us all to be okay. Nobody has to win because when we collaborate and when we ensure that everyone is okay, what happens is that we all win and that the rest of creation wins. You know, and so just thinking about those things, I think is for me where it's at. You know, thinking about this other term that's in the book in chapter 16 on Skijinwe Bamasawagan, this indigenous way of being, Wilikamawu, which is this internalized sense of equilibrium and harmony, that when we have equilibrium and harmony within ourselves, what we bring forward is balanced. And so, you know, being able to cultivate those things within ourselves, within our communities, to have discussions about how do we do this, to be open to new ideas, to listen to what others have to share, to encourage and speak to the beauty in others that you meet, to be able to say to someone, you know, it's really beautiful for me to see how you do X, Y, or Z. I really admire the way that you do this, or your ability to speak about this, or the influence you have on children, or you know, the gentleness with which you handle this situation. You know, let's start speaking to the beauty within one another. Let's start encouraging the light that lives within one another to shine more brightly, because we're drowning and we're spending 90% of our time defining the water that we're drowning in. And we need to start defining the land that we want to swim toward, collectively visioning the world that we want to create and to inhabit. And so I think that those are the things right now, value-wise, that I think that we should be working on and developing and framing our discussions with, so that we'll know how to move forward. And so here's the book, Sacred Instructions. And I found out recently that my publisher is going to feature the book as one of 21 books that were chosen to help guide people through this time. And so there's 21 books that were chosen, old books and new books. And my book was one of the ones that was chosen to help guide people through this time. And so if you watch my Facebook at facebook.com/sacred instructions, and it's Sacred Instructions, or my name on Instagram, and also on Twitter. It's at Sacred411. And so I will post on those social media pages when my book is the one that's going to be available for a free ebook download. And so you have an opportunity to get the book on a free ebook download. So if you don't have it, I encourage you to do that, and maybe there'll be something of value in there for you. And so we are getting short on time, and I did want to give my friend Chris Wood from Bale, Building a Local Economy in Vermont, an opportunity to share a few words. Chris, would you like to share a few words with us?
Sure. I just wanted to mention that Sherri's been doing this and not getting any compensation for it. So I just was wondering about the opportunity.
I'm going to mute his mic again. Hold on. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. You know, I'm grateful for this work, and I want to see Sherri's efforts, continuing efforts, to be supported in this way. And that's all I wanted to say.
You tricked me. I am going to actually post this weekend. I'm just telling folks that yes, it is being recorded. I am going to post a 4-part course this weekend that people can sign up for, and there'll be a cost associated with it. But again, you know, this is an unusual time. This is an unprecedented time. And I think that every one of us has an obligation to share what it is that we have to share, whether it's conversation and community, whether you know, you have a specific skill that you want to share. And I am going to make sure that I'm offering whatever I feel I have to offer during this time, because I feel like it's my responsibility to do so. So Chris, I thank you for that. And I appreciate you looking out for my well-being, because you know, within the first 10 days of this, I lost 1/3 of my annual income because I, you know, am a event person. And so, you know, I'm not worried, right? I have all of you here having conversation with me. My daughter made me dinner tonight. I'm having some delicious tea. I'm sheltered in place. I have a roof over my head. It's a tiny dog behind me who really likes me a lot. You know, I have what I need right now. But yes, you know, we all have a need to be able to support ourselves and sustain ourselves and pay our rent, which is, you know, a big deal. So I will be offering a course that will have a fee attached to it. But I will also accept any amount of donation to participate in that, because I want to give everybody opportunity to be learning about these specific things that we can be doing. So I'll be talking in the course about the 4 foundations of self-determination that I talk about in the book, in the course, each one in turn over the 4-week period. So there will be an opportunity for me to try to recoup some of my lost income in that way. And you know, you're all welcome to join, and nobody will be turned away. You know, there's that. And so I am going to ask David and Ron and Katharine to share one final word with us, and then we'll take questions from the audience for about 15 minutes. And then, Katharine, why don't we start with you? Any final words? What happened? There you go.
There we go. I think just my final word will be reciprocity.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to share a little thing about reciprocity. You know, one of the things that me and my friend Hawk were talking about one time was reciprocity. And, you know, we were talking about the fact that we have been failing in reciprocity. And Hawk said, you know, we don't even give our bodies back to the earth anymore. We pump our bodies full of chemicals, we stuff them in a box, and then we stuff that box into a cement box. And it never has the opportunity to rejoin the earth. So, you know, we need to start deepening the ways that we're thinking about reciprocity. Tree pods are really attractive to me in regard to returning my body to the earth. So thank you for that, Katharine. David, final words.
I say reconnect with your ancestors, your indigeneity.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And you know, I'll include some of that in the class that I'm going to teach, because I think it's important for everybody to understand that, you know, we have opportunity to connect with ancestral wisdom. And so I'm going to try to pack as much as I can in here into that class about not only do we do we inherit ancestral trauma, we also inherit ancestral wisdom, and it lives within our bodies, and we can actually access that information. Even if we feel like we've lost that connection, we have that opportunity. Okay, meet up from the north. Final words.
What David had mentioned about finding your own ancestral teaching is, and you need to carry your bundles.
Yes.
Within your own nations.
Yeah.
We as Squabbanagiag, the people of the dawn, of the first light, it's our responsibilities. And for the people who live, the settlers who live here too in the East, is that, you know, we want to teach you that it's our responsibility as our great grandfather's son comes up in the East, that we're there to welcome him. And as we put forward our prayers of gratitude for all the things that help us through this life and through the struggles that we're having right now, and everything that sustains life, that we have to always, first and foremost, be grateful.
Yes.
For life. And as we put forward those vibrations from our voices of gratitude, is that when the grandfather travels through the sky and lightens the rest of the world, is that our prayers go with that light, and it enriches the people who are awakened by his immense light. So as we continue that daily, those build and those prayers of gratitude grow. And there's nothing that's more powerful than love.
Yeah.
You know, putting forward those prayers of love and great gratitude for life, and praying for those people who are struggling right now, the ones that don't have a home, don't have a place to go to secure themselves, and for all the people who are sacrificing right now to keeping our bellies full and our lights lit and our lives going. But let's always be grateful.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, all three of you. I want to just share something from the end of my book, and I apologize. It's like when you're at summer camp and you had the flashlight under your chin and you had that ghostly image and you were telling a story. That's how I feel with this light here. I'm trying to minimize its effect. This is from the end of my book on living in a time, the chapter on living in a time of prophecy. And some of this refers back to other parts of the book. So, you know, there may be things that you're wondering about, and I encourage you to look for that free download, or either that or you know, you can get a copy of the book. Our legends tell us that this is not the first time we have been in this situation. According to those stories, we have been here 4 times before. 4 times we have come to this place and we have failed to follow the messages that were given. As a result, many were required to exit the planet and others were driven under the ground. Then we were brought back time and time again to try to correct the errors of our wayward path. Now we have been given another opportunity to correct our course. If we are successful, the prophecies tell us that we will enter into the 5th world, which will lead us back toward peace and harmony with all life. In that 5th world, we will light the 8th fire of unity and work together to heal our wounded hearts and minds. The decisions that we make today will determine whether we reach the 5th world intact or if we'll have to repeat the cycle once again. As we walk this path, we must take care to place our feet carefully, ensuring that the steps we choose are aligned with life. And at all times, we must remember that we are the dream of the ancestors come to life. the living expression of their seventh generation. We are not placeholders in time, but guardians of the future. As such, we have the responsibility for dreaming the next 7 generations into being. This dreaming is the work of our lives. It is what we were born to do. In order to complete this task, we must join our hearts and minds in a unified prayer. Then we must breathe life into a collective vision of peace, harmony, and balance, breathing into our hopes and dreams until that vision begins to take form and our future generations are able to walk into it as flesh and blood. And so I think that that it's so critically important right now that we are having these types of conversations. It's important that we are collectively visioning. There's so much power in us collectively visioning the world that we want to walk into. We are all co-creators of this universe, and we need to start really using our co-creative powers in spiritually and emotionally mature ways. And so I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to open this up to questions. And at the end, before we all say goodbye, I want to offer an opportunity for us to offer an expression of love to one another. So I'll unmute everybody at the end, and we can all share our love with each other before we close. So now I am going to answer some raised hands here. Let me see. Why am I not seeing this? Something has gone terribly wrong. Okay. Oh, there were somebody had just raised their hand to ask a question. Gia. Okay. Gia, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherri, Ron, Katharine, and David so much. I am thinking a lot about learning from how the trees live in community. And we were talking about the ways that energy and information is shared in a forest just last night. And my experience overall of what's been going on in my communities is that they're connecting. Yeah. And that old connections are being energized, and there's the possibility of old connections connecting to other communities. And I don't have a very clear question. I just find it a very interesting thing. If anyone wants to speak to the place of the internet, just different ways of connecting that don't feel very rooted in the earth. My internet is unstable, so thank you.
Okay, so ways of connecting that are not rooted in the earth. I think that, you know, we all have this awareness that the ways that we're connecting right now are a blessing, but at the same time, there's an impact to that. And there's also, you know, when a baby dolphin is born, this was one of the most beautiful things I've ever learned. I think I just walked around smiling about it for like a week after I learned this, that when a baby dolphin is born, the whole dolphin family, right? They call it potting the baby dolphin, and they all touch the baby dolphin. And what that does is it connects all of the electrical circuitry in the body of the baby dolphin. And the whole community is involved in that wiring process. And so, you know, how do we engage in a process of wiring ourselves and one another that is not rooted in technology. And I think that right now it's certainly, not an option. However, what we can do is we can go with ancient technology, and we can, go outside and we can put our feet on the earth. We can place our hands on the trees. We can send our intentions to others. And we can agree to all do this at a certain time of the day with a group of our friends. And maybe you have a common theme, or maybe you have a question that you all want to ask, and you connect with the natural world and you ask that question, and then you come back together and you discuss your experiences with that thing. So it's giving you an opportunity to connect with one another in maybe deeper, more thoughtful ways, but also to connect with the earth as a way of connecting with the rest of life. I mean, it's so critically important. Okay, and another thing that I would encourage people to do is to, connect with the virus, not physically, mind you, but connect with the virus, spiritually, and ask it what it's here to teach us. Ask what wisdom it has for us. Thank it for showing up to help to guide us back toward alignment with life, and ask it to be gentle with our loved ones, just be in communication with what's going on around you in the natural world, and start to really feel a part of it again. Okay, does anyone else have a question? I'm looking for raised hands. Okay. Eve, did you have a question? Oh, hold on, I gotta unmute you. There's a way to actually raise your hand on the program, because there's like 200 people on, and so I can't see everybody's hand. Go ahead, Eve.
Oh, great, thank you. Sherri, I was so pleased to hear at one point, I think it was David, speaking about the role of creativity and the arts and the kinds of healing that we need to do now. So that's my area, and that's what I'm very much connected to trying to do now. So I would love to hear a little bit more from any of you on how artists and cultural workers can really bring forward something that's going to be helpful at this point.
Yeah, David, do you want to start?
You might be away.
Yeah, sure. I think I just want to say briefly that the last question, my ears perked up as well. But when we think about spirituality, it is a technology. And I think decolonizing doesn't necessarily mean disavowing the current technologies. Like you said, we are blessed to have it. But in terms of art, the way that many people, or the way that problem solving is described in psychology is very similar to creativity. Like there's a problem, or there's something that we want to do, so we create something. And I think that partly us slowing down is a moment to tap into how do we create solutions for the things that we have concerns about right now. And that's, I mean, for me, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing. Like, I'm not a artist per se, but I spend a lot of time, like Sherri says, like co-creating with colleagues and coming up with ideas to like deal with particular solutions with, say, you know, not the kind of funding that we need to do it. Or, you know, like I think that's part of what it is. It's like, how do we cultivate and elicit ideas to deal with the problems that we have in this moment. So, and it's probably, you know, some of the same work that you're doing, and you know this already, but you know what I was also thinking about is that I read somewhere that like about poetry, and it was just saying like how poetry, for instance, is not extra, is so necessary in this particular moment. I mean, for hope, but also I think to help us work our way out of where we are right now as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's this also this kind of separation that's possible with people who are like, I'm not an artist, but, or you know, there can be this elitist thing about it, and really, you know, connecting into each of us have a source of creativity and learning how to express and rethink and explode what's possible. So, you know, I'm kind of connected to that for people too.
Thank you. Ron and Katharine, do either of you have anything to add to that?
I think David said that so well and so beautifully. And I have been trying to stay off of social media more than normal. And I peeped on and had gotten sort of added into this, you know, dude debate about it doesn't even matter what, you know, sort of data slinging and just, you know, and I just was like, guys, like, just go read a poem. So I really resonate with that, David, the notion that like, this is not extra. This is like foundational 101 must do. And I was like, yeah, the next time I find myself wanting to sort of like, you know, fact at someone, maybe I should recite a poem instead. So memorizing some poems maybe on my on my stay at home agenda.
Yeah, remember the one I recommended, Neruda, Sonnet 17. And so, you know, I think that another thing to think about in regard to that is that art elicits emotion, right? I mean, it's this expression of what lives within us. And so for about 27 years of my life, I was a dancer. And it was a way for me to express the emotions that were too big for me to vocalize. It was a way for me to bring forth what was inside of me and to express it through my body in a way that I didn't have the capacity for when I was a much younger woman. And so visual art, now I express myself through my writing and finally have been able to find my voice as a result of working through all of these artistic ways of expression that have allowed me to discover the me that lived under the surface. And so I think that, you know, being able to connect with the arts is a way for us to also uncover what lives deep within us, because it connects to our soul in so many ways. It's really powerful. Okay, and so what I'd like to do right now is I'm going to unmute everybody, and I would invite you to just give one collective kind of love ohm to everybody else. So just, you know, like do the little ET heart light thing out for everybody that's listening, and send your love to everybody to help strengthen our immune systems. We're giving each other just this spiritual and energetic hug. And so I am going to unmute everyone, and then I will give you a 1, 2, 3, and then just, you know, shout out your love to everybody. Okay, here we go. 1, 2,
Thank you.
Right.
So much love.
To everybody.
Stay strong.
Thank you so
Sherri.
much.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, David. Thank you, Katharine.
and Ron.
Hi. So much hope.
Love you.
Goodbye.
Namaste.